My sister threw me out of her apartment, not knowing I was the one who bought the entire building worth $2.5 million. Welcome back, family. If you haven't already, subscribe and say hi in the comments. We'd love to know where you're watching from. With that, let's continue today's story. I stood in the hallway, my suitcase at my feet, staring at the door that had just been slammed in my face. My sister's voice still echoed in my ears. Get out of my apartment, Maya. You don't belong here anymore. The lock clicked with a finality that made my chest tighten. 28 years of sisterhood reduced to this moment. 3 months ago, I'd moved into what I thought was a safe space. My sister Carol had called me, tears in her voice, begging me to come stay with her. I need you, Maya, she'd said. Mom and Dad are driving me crazy and I'm so lonely in this big place. I'd left my cramped studio across town, believing family came first. Believing she actually wanted me there. The building's marble floors gleamed under the hallway lights as I tried to process what just happened. My hands trembled as I pulled out my phone. The screen lit up with a reminder. Property management meeting 2 p.m. Right. Because while Carol thought she was queen of her domain, I held a secret she couldn't imagine. If you're watching this, you probably know what it feels like to be rejected by family. Drop a comment and let me know your story. You're not alone. I picked up my suitcase, but I didn't head for the elevator. Instead, I walked down the hall to the building manager's office. It was time for Carol to learn the truth. Time for her to understand that the luxury apartment she'd been bragging about for 2 years? I bought this entire building. Every single unit. All $2.5 million worth. The memory hit me as I walked. 6 years ago, sitting in Mom's kitchen watching Carol laugh about my little computer job. Dad had just retired from the factory and Mom was serving her famous pot roast. I was 22, working 80-hour weeks as a junior developer, living on ramen noodles while building my first app. Maya thinks she's going to be rich from making phone games, Carol had announced, twirling her wine glass. She was 24, working part-time at a boutique, still living at home rent-free. Mom, can you believe she turned down that receptionist job at Dad's buddy's company? A real job with benefits. I'd smiled tightly, cutting my meat into smaller pieces. It's not a game, Carol. It's a productivity app for... Nobody cares, Maya, Dad interrupted, reaching for more potatoes. Your sister's right. You need stability. This tech stuff is a phase. You're wasting your degree. Mom had nodded, patting Carol's hand. At least Carol understands the value of real work. Maybe you should be more like your sister, Maya. Practical. Grounded. I'd excused myself early that night, driving back to my studio apartment with tears streaming down my face. The app launched 3 months later. Within 6 months, a major tech company acquired it for $8 million. I was 23 years old and suddenly wealthy beyond my wildest dreams. I never told them. Not right away. I wanted to see who they really were first. That decision saved me from years of fake love and manipulative behavior. It also showed me exactly where I stood in my family's hierarchy. I remembered the day I bought this building like it was yesterday. My financial advisor, Lance, had spread the documents across his mahogany desk, his dark eyes serious behind wire-rimmed glasses. Maya, this is a significant investment. Are you certain about this? Completely certain, I'd replied, signing page after page. The building was in foreclosure. A beautiful pre-war structure with 20 units in a rapidly gentrifying neighborhood. The previous owner had let it deteriorate, but I saw potential. I saw home. Lance had leaned back, studying me. Your family doesn't know about your financial situation, do you? In my 20 years doing this work, I've never seen someone maintain this level of privacy from their own parents. You don't know my family, I'd said quietly. My sister called me last week. First time in 8 months. She needed money for a security deposit. When I said I couldn't help, she called me selfish and hung up. The irony wasn't lost on me. I had millions in the bank, but I told Carol no because I wanted to see if she'd call back, apologize, just talk to me like a sister. She never did. Until a year later when she needed a place to complain about our parents. I'm renovating the entire building, I'd told Lance. Top to bottom. I want it to be somewhere people feel safe. Somewhere they belong. The renovations took 18 months and cost another $1 million. I'd poured my heart into every detail. Hardwood floors, modern kitchens, updated electrical systems. I'd chosen the paint colors myself. When it was done, the building was worth $2.5 million, easy. I'd listed the units at reasonable rents, wanting good tenants, not just wealthy ones. Carol had been first to apply. When Carol's application crossed my desk, forwarded by my property manager, Janet, I'd stared at it for a full hour. My sister's name on official paperwork, requesting to rent unit 304. My best unit. The one with the balcony overlooking the courtyard I'd personally landscaped. Janet had called me confused. Maya, the applicant for 304 has the same last name as you. Is she? My sister, I'd confirmed. Process her application like anyone else's. Don't mention I'm the owner. Janet had hesitated. Are you sure? Her credit score is not great. And her income barely meets our threshold. She's working retail, listed your parents as co-signers, but their income isn't much better. I'd reviewed the numbers. Carol was making $32,000 a year, asking to rent a $2,200 a month apartment. The math didn't work. Any other applicant would have been rejected immediately. Approve it, I'd said. Reduce her rent to $1,400. Tell her the owner is offering a special rate for long-term tenants. Maya, Janet had started. I know what I'm doing, I'd interrupted, though I wasn't sure I did. Part of me wanted to give Carol a chance, a nice place to live that she could actually afford. Part of me wanted to observe her, see if she'd changed. And part of me, the part one wasn't proud of, wanted her close by, under my control for once in my life. Carol had moved in 2 years ago, never once questioning the discounted rent or wondering who owned the building. She'd posted dozens of photos on social media, calling it my luxury apartment, bragging about making it, never once thanking me. Over the next 18 months, I'd watched my sister transform from grateful to entitled. I'd remained anonymous, staying in my penthouse on the top floor, the one unit I'd kept for myself, listed under an LLC so nobody could trace it back to me. Janet would forward me complaints. Carol called again. She wants us to repaint her living room. Says the beige is depressing, and she deserves better. Another time, she's demanding we remove the tenant in 204. Says their music is too loud at 7 p.m. I checked. They were playing jazz at reasonable volume. The breaking point came when Mom and Dad visited. I'd seen them arrive from my window, watched them walk into the building carrying casserole dishes. I wasn't invited to that dinner. Hadn't been invited to family gatherings in 3 years, not since I'd stopped loaning money I'd never see returned. My phone rang an hour later. Carol's name lit up the screen. Curiosity made me answer. Maya. Her voice was bright, artificial. So, I'm having a little financial trouble. The rent went up. It hadn't. And I was thinking, since you have that computer job, maybe you could help me out? Just $500 a month until I get back on my feet. I'd closed my eyes, standing in my custom kitchen with its marble countertops and professional-grade appliances. Carol, I can't right now. I have my own expenses. Of course you do, she'd snapped, the sweetness evaporating. You know what? Forget it. I should have known better than to ask you for anything. You've always been selfish. She'd hung up. I'd stared at my phone, feeling something cold settle in my chest. The sister I'd loved, the one I'd shared a bedroom with growing up, was gone. In her place was a stranger who saw me as an ATM. Comment below if you've ever had family treat you like a bank instead of a person. 3 months ago everything changed. Carol called me at midnight, sobbing so hard I could barely understand her words. Maya, please. I need you. Can you come over? I'd thrown on clothes and rushed to her apartment, my heart pounding. Despite everything, she was still my sister. The door opened to reveal Carol in pajamas, mascara streaming down her face, the apartment in disarray. What happened? Are you hurt? I'd asked, scanning for injuries. It's Mom and Dad, she'd gasped. They're suffocating me, Maya. Every day it's, when are you getting a better job? And, why aren't you married? And your sister might be smart but she's alone. I can't take it anymore. I need someone on my side. Please, will you stay with me for a while? Just until I figure things out. I'd looked into her eyes and seen genuine pain. The same pain I'd carried for years, the weight of never being enough for our parents. In that moment, I'd made a decision I'd come to regret. Okay, I'd said. I'll stay. The next day, I'd moved a few bags into her guest room. I'd told Janet to hold my mail, that I'd be staying in Unit 304 temporarily. Janet had looked concerned but said nothing. Those first weeks were good. We'd stayed up late talking, sharing stories, laughing at old memories. I'd cooked dinners while Carol complained about customers at the boutique. We'd watched movies on her couch. My couch technically, since I'd furnished the unit. For a moment, I'd believed we could be sisters again. But as anyone who's dealt with toxic family knows, good times with toxic people are just intermissions between disasters. Then Mom and Dad visited again. They'd arrived on a Sunday afternoon and I'd immediately felt the atmosphere shift. Dad had looked at me like I was an unwelcome stranger. Why, didn't know you'd be here. She's staying with me, Carol had said, her voice taking on an edge I hadn't heard in weeks. Since she doesn't have much going on. I'd frozen a plate of cookies halfway to the coffee table. I'm just helping Carol out. She asked me to stay. Mom had pursed her lips. Well, Carol's always been generous. Too generous sometimes. Maya dear, don't you think you should get your own place? You're almost 30. Still bouncing around. I have my own place, I'd started, then caught myself. They didn't know about the penthouse. Didn't know about any of it. Dad had settled into the armchair, the one I'd custom ordered. Carol works hard for this apartment. She doesn't need a freeloader taking advantage. She's not freeloading, Carol had said, but weakly. Not the defense I'd hoped for. The visit had lasted 3 hours. 3 hours of passive-aggressive comments about my computer job, questions about why I wasn't married, suggestions that I should be more ambitious like Carol. The sister who worked part-time retail and lived in an apartment she could barely afford. The apartment I owned and had discounted specifically for her. After they left, I'd retreated to the guest room. Through the wall, I'd heard Carol on the phone. Yeah, Mom, I know. She's a bit pathetic, isn't she? But she's family. What can you do? I'd packed my bags that night. But before I could leave, Carol had knocked on my door, tears in her eyes again. I'm sorry. I don't know why I said that. Please don't go. I really do need you here. Foolishly, I'd stayed. His name was Deshawn and he appeared in week 6 of my stay. Carol had been secretive about him, mentioning a new relationship but offering few details. When I finally met him, I understood why. He'd walked into the apartment like he owned it. Designer jacket, expensive cologne, the kind of confidence that comes from never being told no. So you're the sister, he'd said, looking me up and down with barely concealed disdain. Carol said you were staying here temporarily. How temporary we talking? That's between me and Carol, I'd replied evenly. He'd laughed, turning to Carol. Baby, I thought we talked about this. When I move in next month, we can't have a third wheel cramping our style. I'd looked at my sister. You're moving him in? Carol had avoided my eyes. We're in love, Maya. You wouldn't understand. You've never had anyone serious. And technically this is my apartment. I can do what I want. Technically. That word had stung more than it should have. Technically, every inch of this apartment was mine. Technically, I could evict her with 30 days' notice. Technically, I held all the power she thought she had. But I'd said nothing, just nodded and retreated to my room. Deshawn had started staying over regularly, treating me like an inconvenience. He'd use the bathroom for an hour every morning. He'd eat my food from the fridge. He'd watch TV at volume levels that shook the walls. Drop a like if you've ever had to deal with someone else's terrible partner invading your space. When I'd politely asked him to turn down the volume one night, he'd smirked. Maybe you should get your own place instead of mooching off your successful sister. Successful. I'd almost laughed. Almost told him everything right then. It happened on a Tuesday morning. I'd been living with Carol for almost 3 months, and the situation had deteriorated beyond recognition. Deshawn was there 5 nights a week, treating the apartment like his personal domain. Carol had stopped pretending we were having sister time. Most nights, they'd lock themselves in her room, leaving me to sit in my guest room, the room I'd designed with floor-to-ceiling windows, feeling like an intruder in my own building. That morning, I'd made coffee and sat down at the kitchen table to review some documents Janet had sent over. One of my tenants in Unit 412 was requesting a lease renewal. I was reading through it when Deshawn had emerged from Carol's bedroom shirtless, scratching his stomach. "You still here?" he'd muttered, opening my custom refrigerator. "Thought you'd have left by now." "Carol asked me to stay," I'd replied calmly. He'd pulled out orange juice, the expensive organic kind I'd bought, and drunk directly from the carton. "Yeah, well, things change. We're planning our future here. This apartment's about to become a home for a real family, you know? No room for hangers-on." Something in his tone had made me look up. "Excuse me." "You heard me." He'd leaned against the counter, orange juice in hand. "Carol's too nice to say it, but I'm not. You need to leave. Find your own place. Stop living off your sister's success." The irony was so absurd I'd actually laughed. The sound had startled both of us. "Something funny?" Deshawn had demanded. Before I could respond, Carol had appeared in the doorway, wrapped in a silk robe. My robe, actually, one I'd left in the bathroom. "What's going on?" "Just telling your sister it's time to go," Deshawn had said casually. Carol had looked between us and I'd watched something calculate behind her eyes. Some decision being made. When she spoke, her voice was cold. "He's right, Maya. It's been 3 months. You said you'd stay temporarily. This is temporary. Time's up." I'd set down my coffee cup slowly. "Carol, you asked me to be here. You called me crying, begging." "I was having a moment," she'd interrupted. "I'm fine now. Better than fine. Deshawn and I are building something and we need our space. You understand." "I understand perfectly," I'd said quietly. "When do you want me out?" "Today," Deshawn had interjected. "Like now. We have plans." Carol had nodded. "That works. Maya, can you just pack your stuff? We'll catch up later or whatever." I'd stood, my legs feeling disconnected from my body. This was happening. Actually happening. "You want me to leave right now? This minute?" "Don't be dramatic," Carol had sighed. "Take an hour. But yeah, today. I'll help you carry your bags." That's when it hit me, the full weight of my family's disregard. Not just today's dismissal, but years of it. Every time they'd minimized my achievements. Every family gathering I wasn't invited to. Every phone call that only came when they needed something. Every moment I'd tried to be a good daughter, a good sister, and been met with indifference or contempt. "Fine," I'd said. "I'll go." I'd packed in silence while Carol and Deshawn whispered in the living room. 45 minutes later, I'd stood at the door with my suitcase, looking at my sister one last time. "Carol," I'd said softly, "did you ever actually want me here? Or did you just need someone to complain to until Deshawn came along?" She'd rolled her eyes. "God, Maya, why do you always have to make everything about you? Yes, I wanted you here when I needed support. Now I don't. People move on. Grow up. Get out of my apartment," she'd added, stepping closer. "You don't belong here anymore. Actually, you never really did. This is mine. I earned this. Me. Not you." That's when she'd pushed me, not hard but firmly, into the hallway. The door had slammed in my face, the lock clicking with finality. I'd stood there for 30 seconds, maybe a minute, letting the reality settle over me like a heavy blanket. Then I'd pulled out my phone and called Janet. "I'm coming to the office," I'd said. "It's time." Janet had been waiting when I'd arrived, her expression sympathetic. She was a black woman in her 50s, sharp as a tack, who'd managed properties for 20 years before I'd hired her. She'd understood from day one why I'd kept my identity secret. "You ready to do this?" she'd asked. "More than ready," I'd replied. "Let's start with Unit 304. Janet had pulled up Carol's lease on her computer. "She's 2 months behind on rent. I've been covering it from the discretionary fund like you asked. She doesn't even know she's delinquent." My stomach had twisted. "I've been paying my own rent while she threw me out?" "Essentially, yes," Janet had confirmed. Should I proceed with the 30-day notice? I'd thought about it. Thought about Carol's face when she'd pushed me into the hallway. Thought about Deshawn drinking from my juice carton. Thought about years of being treated like I was less than, like I was the family failure, when all along I'd been the one holding the cards. No, I'd said. I'm going to tell her myself. If you've made it this far, comment justice below. This is where everything changes. I'd returned to Unit 304 20 minutes later, Janet beside me, carrying a folder of documents. My hands had been steady as I'd knocked. 3 sharp raps on the door I'd chosen in the building I'd bought on the floor I'd refinished. Carol had opened it, annoyed. Maya, I told you. I'm not here as your sister, I'd interrupted. I'm here as your landlord. The confusion on her face would have been comical if my heart hadn't been breaking. What? My name is Maya Johnson, Janet had said formally, stepping forward. I'm the property manager for this building. This is Maya Johnson, the owner. You're 2 months behind on rent, and we're here to discuss your immediate eviction. Carol had laughed. Actually laughed. Is this a joke? Maya, what kind of weird prank? It's not a prank, I'd said quietly. I bought this building 3 years ago for $2.5 million. I renovated it. I chose every paint color, every fixture. I approved your application personally and reduced your rent by $800 a month because you're my sister. I've been subsidizing your life while you treated me like garbage. The color had drained from her face. You're lying. Janet had opened the folder showing lease documents, ownership papers, bank statements. These are all public record. Your sister owns this entire building. Every unit. Including this one. Deshawn had appeared behind Carol. Baby, what's going on? Your girlfriend, I'd said, looking directly at him, has been living in an apartment owned by the hanger you've been insulting. The moocher you wanted gone? I'm worth 8 figures. Every time you drank my orange juice, every time you told me to leave, you were standing in my property, eating my food, breathing my air. His mouth had fallen open. Carol had stumbled backward. Maya, wait. Let me explain. I didn't know. You didn't know because you never asked, I'd said, my voice finally breaking. You never wondered how I could take 3 months off work. Never questioned why I was always available. You just assumed I was failing because that fit your narrative better. It made you feel superior. Please, she'd whispered. Don't do this. I'm your sister. You stopped being my sister the moment you pushed me into that hallway, I'd replied. Janet, proceed with the eviction. 30 days. Maya, no. Carol had grabbed my arm. I have nowhere to go. Mom and Dad can't take me in, you know how they are. Please. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'd looked at her, really looked at her, and seen not my sister but a stranger. Someone who'd taken and never once said thank you. Someone who'd built her self-esteem by tearing me down. Someone who'd chosen a man she'd known for 3 months over the sister who'd given her everything. You'll figure it out, I'd said. You always told me how successful you are. How you earned all this. So earn your way out. I turned to leave, Janet following, when Carol had collapsed to her knees. I'll tell Mom and Dad. They'll make you. Tell them, I'd said, not turning around. Tell them how their failure daughter owns a $2.5 million building. Tell them how I gave you a discount you never deserved. Tell them everything. I don't care anymore. That was 6 months ago. Carol moved out on day 28, going to live with Deshawn in his studio apartment, which lasted 2 weeks before he kicked her out too. She's with Mom and Dad now in their small 2-bedroom house, sleeping on the couch. She's called me 147 times. I've answered 0. Mom and Dad tried to reach out, suddenly interested in their successful daughter. I blocked them too. Last week I ran into Carol at a grocery store. She looked tired, older somehow. She'd opened her mouth to speak, but I'd just walked past. I had nothing left to say. People ask if I regret it. If I feel guilty for evicting my own sister. The truth? Some days I do. Some days I miss the sister I thought I had, the family I wanted us to be. But most days I remember standing in that hallway, suitcase at my feet, heart shattered, realizing that the people who should have loved me most only loved what they thought I could give them. I renovated Unit 304 last month. Marble countertops, new appliances, smart home technology. I raised the rent to $2,800. Market rate. A young couple moved in last week. Teachers who hold hands in the elevator and say, "Thank you for everything." My building is full now. 20 families who pay their rent, respect their neighbors, and treat the property like a home. I host a barbecue every summer in the courtyard. I know their names, their stories, their dreams. I still live in the penthouse alone. But alone feels different now. It feels like peace. If you've made it to the end of this story, I hope you know your worth isn't determined by how your family treats you. Sometimes the family we choose, the people who appreciate us, matters more than the family we're born into. I built a $2.5 million empire while my family called me a failure. I gave my sister everything while she gave me nothing. And in the end I chose myself. I finally chose myself. Subscribe if this story resonated with you. Share it with someone who needs to hear that choosing yourself isn't selfish, it's survival. And comment your own stories below. Your experience matters. Your pain is valid. And you deserve better. The building stands tall, my name on the deed, my rules on every lease. Carol can drive past it whenever she wants, can see the lights and windows she once called hers. She can remember what it felt like to have everything handed to her and throw it away for pride. Me. I water the plants in my courtyard, approve lease renewals, and sleep soundly knowing I'm finally free. Some endings aren't happy, but they're honest. And sometimes, honest is enough.